What if the man you loved, the one who promised you forever, was actually planning your country's destruction? Millicent Albright pressed her ear tighter to the cold, carved oak of the library door. Inside, the low murmur of voices, thick with a foreign accent she knew intimately Eric's. But this wasn't the charming, flirtatious tone that had wooed her on moonlit Central Park strolls. This was sharp, clipped, urgent. A language she barely understood, peppered with a word that made her blood run cold. Abwehr. German military intelligence. Her breath caught, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Just an hour ago, Eric had kissed her goodbye, promising to return with orchids. Now his voice, a venomous whisper, carried another phrase through the old wood. New York targets the docks, yes, the Liberty. Millicent's world, built on glittering soirees and whispered vows, was shattering around her, not with a bang, but with the chilling precision of a well-oiled machine. This wasn't just a lover's betrayal. This was war. And she, a queen of New York society, was unknowingly living in its very epicenter. But before we dive deeper, subscribe. Only you love your mom, like and comment if you ever got betrayed. It means a lot to us. We appreciate your support. The year was 1937, and New York City pulsed with an electric energy. The Great Depression was loosening its grip, and a new kind of exuberance filled the air. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, jazz spilled from speakeasies, and on Fifth Avenue, the Albright mansion stood as a testament to enduring wealth and influence. Inside its ornate walls lived Millicent Albright, a woman who seemed to possess everything. 28 years old, with eyes that sparkled like champagne and a wit sharper than any diamond, Millie was the undisputed darling of the social season. Her family name was synonymous with industry, philanthropy, and impeccable taste. She graced society pages, chaired charity balls, and effortlessly navigated a world of debutante dinners and summer soirees in Newport. Her life was a perfectly polished tableau, missing only one piece, a suitable husband. Then he arrived, Count Erich von Brandt. He materialized in New York like a character from a romantic novel, a dashing European with an enigmatic past and a smile that could melt glaciers. He was introduced at a high society gala, a benefit for war orphans, ironically, where Millie was the guest of honor. Eric cut a striking figure amidst the sea of American financiers and old money scions. Tall, impeccably dressed in custom-tailored suits, with piercing blue eyes and a faint, intriguing scar above his left eyebrow, he exuded an aura of old-world charm that was utterly intoxicating. He spoke several languages fluently, his English lightly accented, adding to his allure. He moved with an easy grace, holding fascinating conversations on everything from classical music to burgeoning aviation technology. He spoke of his family's ancient estates in Bavaria, of diplomatic circles in Geneva, and of daring safaris in Africa. He was cultured, witty, and profoundly attentive. Millie, accustomed to the predictable courtship rituals of her peers, the polite calls, the predictable flowers, the conversations about polo and investments, found herself utterly captivated. Eric didn't just ask about her day. He delved into her passions, her dreams, her deepest thoughts. He listened, truly listened, his gaze unwavering, making her feel like the only woman in the crowded room. He brought her rare editions of her favorite poets, remembered obscure details from their conversations, and proposed adventures that thrilled her conservative sensibilities. A midnight carriage ride through Central Park, culminating in a stolen kiss under the lamplight. A spontaneous trip to a hidden jazz club in Harlem where they danced until dawn. He made her feel vibrant, seen, alive in a way no one ever had. Their courtship was a whirlwind, a scandalous delight that set tongues wagging across the city. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Within months, society columnists were openly speculating about an engagement. Millie's parents, initially wary of the mysterious count with no visible source of income beyond a vague mention of family investments and advisory work, were soon disarmed by his flawless manners and sincere devotion to their daughter. Eric charmed them all, the stern patriarch, the demanding matriarch, even the cynical family lawyer. He was a master of assimilation, seamlessly integrating himself into their world, learning the intricacies of American business, the nuances of their political leanings, even their favorite Sunday brunch spots. He moved into a lavish suite at the Waldorf Astoria, maintaining a semblance of independence, yet always within Millie's orbit. He presented himself as a scion of a proud German aristocratic family, a man who admired American ingenuity and liberty, but who also grieved for the turmoil gripping his homeland. He spoke of the unfortunate rise of nationalism in Germany with a practiced melancholy, assuring Millie and her family that his true allegiances lay with peace and progress. This placated any lingering doubts about his German origins at a time when the shadow of Nazism was beginning to stretch across Europe. Everyone believed him, Millie most of all. She loved him with an intensity that surprised even herself. She saw her future with him, a life of shared adventures, intellectual partnership, and deep, abiding affection. He was everything she had ever unconsciously desired, the missing piece to her gilded existence. She was convinced she knew him, down to his very soul. But even in the dizzying heights of infatuation, tiny fissures began to appear in his perfect facade, almost imperceptible at first, like faint cracks in fine china. A quick, unreadable flicker in his eyes when she mentioned a specific political figure. A sudden, tense shift in posture when a news report about European tensions came on the radio. He was always elusive about his past, dismissing questions about specific family members or events with vague pleasantries, attributing it to a desire to live in the present. He was charmingly mysterious, she told herself. It was part of his allure. Yet, a tiny, insistent voice in the back of her mind, a voice she tried to ignore, whispered a different word: secretive. One evening, during a quiet dinner at the Albright mansion, Eric received a call. It was a late hour for business, and the caller had been insistent. Millie heard him speak in low, hushed tones in German from the library. When he returned, his usual composure was slightly ruffled. He apologized, attributing the call to urgent family matters overseas. But Millie had caught a glimpse of his notes on the desk, a series of numbers and what looked like a coded sequence of letters. He swept them away almost too quickly. He covered it with a dazzling smile and an even more dazzling declaration of love, pulling her close, distracting her with his undeniable charm. She dismissed it as paranoia. The engagement was announced in the spring of 1938, a glittering affair that cemented Erich von Brandt's place in New York's highest circles. He moved into a lavish apartment on Park Avenue, close enough to the Albright mansion to be convenient, but with a degree of independence that he insisted upon. Millie found it charmingly masculine. Her father found it practical. But as the wedding planning consumed her days, Millie's subtle anxieties about Eric began to sharpen, transforming from vague unease into a persistent, nagging suspicion. The charming mysteries now felt like deliberate evasions. His elusive past became a gaping hole she couldn't fill. It started with small things, easily explained away, but accumulating into a pattern. His business trips to Washington, D.C. or Boston were becoming more frequent, often lasting several days, with little notice. He'd return with gifts, a new story, and a renewed surge of affection, as if to compensate for his absence. But his explanations for these trips were always vague: consulting on European investments, meeting with foreign dignitaries. When Millie pressed for details, his smile would tighten ever so slightly, his eyes losing their warmth for a fraction of a second before he'd smoothly change the subject or deflect with a witty remark. She noticed he never carried much luggage on these trips, just a small, nondescript briefcase. What kind of business traveler needed so little? Then there were the calls, always late at night or in the early hours of the morning. Eric would vanish into his study, the door firmly closed, his voice barely audible even if Millie passed by. When she asked who it was, he'd offer a quick, almost too-rehearsed explanation. An old-school friend in Zurich, or my solicitor regarding a land dispute. But the calls often lasted an hour or more, far longer than a casual chat. And sometimes after these calls, she would find him staring out the window, a faraway, troubled look on his face that quickly vanished when he sensed her presence. His possessions, too, held subtle incongruities. For a man of such purported wealth, he had surprisingly few personal effects from his past. A signet ring, a few antique books, and a collection of rare stamps. No childhood photos, no letters from family members, no sentimental trinkets. He once mentioned his family home had been destroyed during the Great War, which explained the lack of heirlooms, but it still felt too clean, too convenient. More troubling was a specific item she discovered by accident. One afternoon, while straightening his desk in his study, a room he usually kept meticulously private, she found a small, intricately carved wooden box hidden beneath a stack of financial reports. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, wasn't jewelry or love letters, but a small, sleek shortwave radio, unlike anything she had ever seen. It was compact, clearly designed for discretion. And next to it, a small notepad filled with what looked like a series of random letters and numbers, a substitution cipher perhaps. Her heart gave a cold thump against her ribs. When she asked him about it later, he smoothly dismissed it as an antique curiosity, a hobby of mine, and the notepad as doodling. But his gaze was sharp, assessing, and she felt a wave of icy apprehension. Millie, a woman of sharp intellect and keen observation, began to piece together these fragments. Her upbringing had taught her the importance of discretion, the art of subtle inquiry. She started to observe Eric with a new lens, not as a besotted fiancé, but as a detached investigator. She noticed his peculiar habits. He always paid in cash, rarely used credit. He seemed to have an unusual knowledge of local infrastructure, the locations of power lines, water mains, even the precise timing of certain shipping movements in the harbor. He had an almost uncanny ability to blend into any crowd, to become invisible when he wished. He was a chameleon, she realized, and the true color of his skin was still hidden from her. The escalating tensions in Europe only exacerbated Millie's growing paranoia. Newsreels depicted Hitler's rallies, the annexation of Austria, the Sudetenland crisis. Whispers of war filled the air, even in insulated New York. Eric, who once spoke of nationalism with vague disdain, now seemed to avoid the topic altogether. If pressed, he would offer carefully worded condemnations of the Nazi regime, but they lacked the genuine passion she heard from others who truly feared the gathering storm. It felt like a performance. One fateful evening, Millie's fears transformed into a chilling reality. Eric had gone out to a club meeting, another one of his vague engagements. Driven by an unbearable compulsion, Millie let herself into his Park Avenue apartment with a spare key he had given her. She felt like an intruder in the space of the man she loved, her actions feeling sordid and wrong. But the growing dread was stronger than her guilt. She began to search, not for proof of infidelity, but for something far more unsettling. She checked his study first, then his bedroom. In the back of a rarely used drawer beneath a pile of old socks, she found it, a small, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a diary. Inside, written in neat, precise script, were lists. Lists of names, some prominent, some obscure, dates, locations, and alongside them cryptic abbreviations and symbols. But it was one particular entry, circled in red ink, that made her breath catch. SS St. Louis Havana Route Cargo Inspection Protocols. The SS St. Louis was a ship currently making headlines, carrying Jewish refugees desperately seeking asylum, turned away from port after port. Why would Eric be tracking its cargo inspection protocols? It made no sense unless it wasn't about cargo at all. Millicent fled Eric's apartment that night, not to her own home, but to the discreet townhouse of her Aunt Beatrice, a woman known for her sharp mind and even sharper discretion. Millie couldn't articulate the full horror of what she'd found, not yet. The words felt too monstrous, too unbelievable. She spent the night pacing, the chilling images from Eric's notebook replaying in her mind like a macabre film. The cold reality of it all was beginning to sink in. The man she loved, the man she was to marry in mere months, was a Nazi spy. The weight of that truth was crushing, a betrayal that cut deeper than any dagger. Her perfect life, her carefully constructed future, lay in ruins. But amidst the shock and heartache, a different emotion began to surface: cold, hard fury. How dare he? How dare he use her, her family, her country as mere pawns in his monstrous game? Her love, her trust had been meticulously cultivated, a delicate facade behind which he executed his nefarious plans. Millie Albright was not a woman to crumble. She was an Albright, forged in a legacy of strength and resolve. Her initial instinct for self-preservation quickly morphed into a steely determination to uncover the full extent of his deception, and then to stop him. She knew that simply exposing him as a German national wouldn't be enough, not in a city teeming with German immigrants and sympathizers who viewed their homeland through a distorted lens. She needed undeniable proof, and she needed to understand the scope of his mission. The task ahead was monumental and terrifying. Millie had no experience with espionage, no contacts in intelligence. She was a socialite, accustomed to managing charity balls, not clandestine operations. But she possessed unique assets: unparalleled access to Eric, a sharp mind honed by years of managing her family's affairs, and a social network that reached into every corner of New York's elite. She would become a spy in her own home, in her own relationship. Her love for Eric, once her greatest joy, now became her most potent weapon and her most dangerous vulnerability. She began by observing Eric with meticulous precision. Every word, every gesture, every fleeting expression was scrutinized. She learned to read the subtle changes in his tone, the way his eyes would shift when he was lying, the casual phrases he used to mask deeper meanings. She developed an almost photographic memory for details. The contents of his briefcase, the times of his calls, the names dropped in passing. She made excuses to be in his study, to help him organize, to subtly rummage through papers, always under the guise of an adoring fiancée. She discovered a pattern to his business trips. They often coincided with specific political developments or shipping movements. His advisory work seemed to involve an unusual interest in American industrial capacity and infrastructure. Millie started to use her social connections, not for gossip, but for information. At dinner parties, she'd casually steer conversations towards international politics, shipping routes, or defense manufacturing, listening intently to the responses of the powerful men around her. She charmed naval officers into revealing details about port security. She subtly questioned bankers about foreign investments and suspicious transactions. She learned to extract information without revealing her true intent, a skill she never knew she possessed. Her seemingly innocent questions, cloaked in social curiosity, became a sophisticated network of intelligence gathering. One afternoon, while Eric was out, Millie returned to his apartment. This time, she was prepared. She had purchased a miniature camera, discreetly hidden in her purse. She systematically photographed pages from his hidden notebook, including the schematics and the lists of names. She also found a small, leather-bound dictionary in his study, unusual because it was a German-English dictionary but with numerous passages underlined and annotated with what appeared to be numerical codes. A codebook. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. She also discovered a hidden compartment in the back of his desk drawer, where he kept a second, smaller radio, a transmitter, she realized with dread. He wasn't just receiving information, he was sending it. The danger was palpable. Each discovery was a victory, but also a tightening noose. She was playing a deadly game, walking a tightrope between adoration and accusation. She knew that if Eric discovered her investigation, her life, and potentially her family's, would be in grave peril. He was a ruthless operative, not the charming lover she once believed him to be. The stakes were no longer just about personal betrayal, they were about national security. The world was on the brink of war, and America, though officially neutral, was deeply involved in supporting the Allies. Eric's targets, the docks, the factories, the Liberty, she suspected it was a ship, a vital supply vessel, weren't just abstract points on a map. They were potential casualties, vital arteries of American power. One night, Millicent accompanied Eric to a diplomatic reception hosted by a neutral European embassy. The room buzzed with foreign dignitaries, whispers of impending conflict, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Eric, ever the consummate charmer, moved through the crowd, engaging in light conversation, his eyes constantly scanning. Millie noticed him discreetly exchange a brief, almost imperceptible glance with a severe-looking attaché from the German embassy. A shiver ran down her spine. Later, as Eric excused himself for a moment, Millie found herself near a secluded corner. She heard a hushed conversation from behind a thick velvet curtain, two voices speaking in rapid German. One was the attaché, the other was Eric. "The Liberty sails on the 14th, the attaché murmured. "The explosives are in place, confirmation for tonight." Eric's voice, colder than she had ever heard it, responded, "Excellent. Ensure the detonators are foolproof. Our timeline is critical. The Americans must be discouraged." The world swam around Millicent as she stumbled away from the velvet curtain, the words "explosives in place" echoing in her ears like a death knell. The glittering ballroom, once a symbol of her comfortable, predictable life, now felt like a death trap, every smiling face a potential enemy, every whispered conversation a new threat. Eric, her fiancé, the man who had promised her eternal devotion, was a saboteur, a murderer in waiting, and the target, the SS Liberty, was set to sail in less than a week. Her mind raced, a terrifying whirlwind of panic and ice-cold logic. She couldn't just scream. She couldn't just run to the nearest police officer. Who would believe her? "My fiancé, Count Eric von Brandt, darling of New York society, is a Nazi spy plotting to blow up a ship." She'd sound hysterical, a jilted lover making wild accusations. Eric was too well-connected, too charming, too adept at deception. He would twist her words, discredit her, perhaps even silence her. The thought sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through her veins. He had already proven he was capable of monstrous acts. What was one more life, even hers, to a man orchestrating mass murder? She had to be smart. She had to be precise. Her first instinct was to go to her father. He was powerful, influential, a man who could open any door in New York. But her father was also old school, a man of rigid propriety and trust in institutions. How would he react to such an outrageous claim about his soon-to-be son-in-law? Would he protect her, or would he try to rationalize, to mediate, to dismiss her fears as feminine overreaction? The risks were too high. If Eric somehow learned of her suspicions through her father, it would be over. Millie knew she needed undeniable, irrefutable proof, something beyond whispered conversations and cryptic notebooks. She had the photographs of his notes, the schematics, the codebook. These were a start, but they were still circumstantial, easily dismissed as curiosities of a European gentleman. She needed something that directly linked Eric to the sabotage plot, something that would resonate with the grave urgency of war. The next few days were a blur of meticulously constructed lies and barely contained terror. Millie returned to Eric's apartment, playing the part of the doting fiancé with a chilling precision that surprised even herself. She smiled, she laughed, she planned wedding details, all while her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Every touch from Eric, every affectionate glance, felt like a viper's embrace. She forced herself to engage in mundane conversations, to feign interest in his daily affairs, while secretly cataloging every detail, every casual remark. She realized that Eric, for all his cunning, still saw her as a beautiful, somewhat naive socialite, easily manipulated by his charm. This, she understood, was her greatest advantage. He underestimated her. Her plan began to solidify. She needed to observe him, to catch him in the act, or at least in a communication directly related to the Liberty. She knew he used the shortwave radio in his hidden compartment. Her task was to listen. She had to learn the schedule of his clandestine transmissions. This was an audacious, incredibly dangerous step. If he caught her, it would mean certain death. Late one night, feigning a sudden migraine, Millie made her way back to Eric's apartment after he had gone to sleep. Her hands trembled as she retrieved the small radio and the codebook. She knew nothing about radios, but she was intelligent and determined. She studied the dials, the frequencies, the peculiar symbols in the codebook. It was a tedious, frustrating process. She spent hours huddled in the darkness of his study, headphones clamped to her ears, tuning through static, trying to make sense of the foreign chatter. She learned to recognize the subtle hum of a transmission, the abrupt bursts of static that preceded a message. It was like learning a new, terrifying language. She discovered his schedule, late at night, often between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. He would transmit for short, precise bursts, then sign off. She realized these weren't casual conversations. They were carefully timed exchanges of critical information. One night she struck gold. Amidst the static, she heard a series of distinct clicks, then a rapid succession of dots and dashes, Morse code. And then a burst of guttural German that she didn't fully understand, but she recognized Eric's clipped, urgent tone. Her heart hammered. She couldn't make out the content, but the fact that he was actively transmitting and the clear urgency in his voice was enough. She used her camera to photograph the radio tuned to the specific frequency, documenting the exact time and date. The next morning, exhaustion gnawing at her, Millie knew she couldn't delay any longer. The Liberty was due to depart in 2 days. She needed to bring her evidence, however incomplete, to someone who would not only believe her but could act immediately. Her mind went to one name, General Donovan. Wild Bill Donovan, a legendary figure from the Great War, a man known for his shrewd intelligence and his growing influence in Washington as America prepared for potential involvement in the looming global conflict. He was a family friend, a man her father held in immense respect. More importantly, he was a man who understood the value of intelligence and the insidious nature of espionage. But how to reach him? He was in Washington, surrounded by layers of bureaucracy. A phone call would be too easily intercepted, too easily dismissed. She needed a face-to-face meeting. A daring idea formed in her mind, one that used her social standing as a shield. She arranged for an impromptu engagement party in Washington, D.C., ostensibly to introduce Eric to some of her father's political connections. She knew Donovan would be on the guest list. This would provide the perfect cover, a chance to speak to him discreetly, away from prying eyes. The journey to Washington was excruciating. Every glance from Eric, every gentle touch, felt like a betrayal. She maintained her composure with superhuman effort, her smile fixed, her voice light, while inside, a storm of dread raged. She packed her small purse with the incriminating photographs, the codebook, and a detailed mental list of every suspicious observation. She was walking into a lion's den, armed only with her wits and a desperate hope that she could make a powerful man believe an unbelievable truth. At the opulent Washington, D.C. ballroom, the air thick with political gossip and champagne, Millie moved with a grace that belied her inner turmoil. Eric, ever the charmer, was in his element, holding court, his German accent adding an exotic appeal to his pronouncements on European affairs. Millie scanned the room, her heart leaping when she spotted General Donovan across the room, deep in conversation with a senator. She waited for her moment, a brief lull in Eric's interactions, and then made her move. "Darling," she said, taking Eric's arm, her voice light and musical, "I simply must introduce you to General Donovan. He was a great friend to my father during the war." Eric, ever eager to expand his network, readily agreed. Millie led them towards the general, her hand subtly squeezing Eric's arm, a silent promise of affection that masked her true intent. The introduction was cordial. Eric, in his flawless English, spoke with deference and admiration, expressing his keen interest in American defense. Donovan, a man whose eyes missed nothing, listened politely, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of assessment in his gaze. As Eric launched into a polite but somewhat lengthy discourse on strategic naval movements, Millie seized her chance. Leaning in slightly, as if to adjust the general's boutonniere, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, "General, I need to speak with you. Urgently. Tonight. There's a matter of national security that cannot wait." General Donovan, true to his word, found a moment to speak with Millicent later that evening, away from the glittering crowd in a small, seldom-used drawing room. He listened, his face impassive as Millie poured out the terrifying narrative. Eric's charm, his elusive past, the hidden radio, the schematics, the codebook, and finally, the overheard conversation about explosives in place and the Liberty. She presented the photographs she had taken, spreading them out on a small table. Donovan examined the grainy images, his brow furrowed in thought. He recognized some of the military installations in the drawings. He flipped through the coded pages of the German dictionary. His silence was unnerving, a heavy weight in the small room. Millicent watched him, her heart thumping, every fiber of her being screaming with the urgency of her message. The Liberty was scheduled to sail in less than 48 hours. Finally, he looked up, his gaze piercing. "Miss Albright," he began, his voice low and measured, "these are grave accusations, and the evidence, while certainly intriguing, is largely circumstantial. A shortwave radio can be a hobby, a codebook perhaps a collector's item. The drawings could be from publicly available sources. And an overheard conversation in a foreign language. Well, ears can be mistaken, can they not?" Millie felt a cold dread wash over her. It was exactly as she had feared. He wasn't dismissing her outright, but he wasn't embracing her story with the immediate action she desperately needed. "General," she pleaded, her voice gaining strength, "I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Eric is not who he pretends to be. He is an operative deeply embedded. He mentioned Operation Sea Lion in his notes, the invasion of Britain. He is plotting against us, against American interests, even now while America stands neutral." Donovan held up a hand. "Miss Albright, I understand your distress, and I do not doubt your sincerity. But this man, Count von Brandt, he has impeccable credentials. He moves in the highest circles. Discrediting him, acting on unverified claims without concrete proof, could cause an international incident, especially given Germany's current political climate and America's delicate neutrality. It could make things worse, not better." He was right. She understood the geopolitical complexities, the tightrope America walked, but understanding didn't quell the burning injustice, the terror that lives were at stake. "What kind of proof do you need, General?" she demanded, a desperate edge to her voice. "What more can I possibly do?" Donovan considered her for a long moment, assessing her resolve. "We need to catch him in the act, Miss Albright, or find irrefutable physical evidence linking him directly to a sabotage plot, something undeniable, something that cannot be explained away." He paused. "Or, we need an inside man, someone close enough to his operations to confirm your suspicions and provide actionable intelligence." His gaze lingered on her. The implication hung heavy in the air. Millie's blood ran cold. He wanted her to be that inside man. He wanted her to put herself in even greater danger. But what choice did she have? The image of the Liberty sailing, unaware of its impending doom, flashed before her eyes. "Tell me what you need, General," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I will get it." Donovan outlined a plan, cautious and complex. He explained that he couldn't officially sanction her actions, that she would be acting entirely at her own risk, but that he would arrange for a discreet contact in New York, a man he trusted implicitly, an FBI agent named Special Agent Thomas Miller, to assist her if she could produce further, more definitive evidence. Agent Miller would be her liaison, her lifeline. But she had to approach him with something more than suspicions. Millie returned to New York, her heart a leaden weight, yet invigorated by a grim determination. She now had a contact, a glimmer of official support, but she also carried the terrifying burden of knowing that the fate of the Liberty rested squarely on her shoulders. Eric, sensing perhaps a subtle shift in her demeanor, or perhaps just growing more anxious as his deadline approached, had become even more watchful. He was less affectionate, more prone to sudden, almost imperceptible bursts of anger if she questioned his movements or absences. The cat-and-mouse game was escalating. She knew she couldn't simply search his apartment again. He would be on high alert. She needed a new strategy. She remembered the hidden compartment in his desk, where she had found the second radio transmitter, What if he kept something else there? Something directly related to the explosives. She also remembered his business trips, which always coincided with his late-night transmissions. Where did he go on these trips? Who did he meet? Millie decided to use her social calendar, usually a source of pleasant distractions, as a tool for surveillance. She engineered opportunities for Eric to be needed elsewhere, at charity functions or business dinners she couldn't attend, creating windows of time when she knew he would be out of the apartment. During one such opportunity, she returned to his study. She examined the hidden compartment again. It was a spring-loaded panel, cleverly disguised. This time she didn't just look inside. She felt along the edges, pressed gently on the back. Her fingers brushed against a tiny, almost invisible latch. With a click, a deeper compartment swung open. Inside, nestled amongst more coded messages and small, unfamiliar tools, she found it. A series of small, meticulously wrapped cylindrical objects, no larger than her thumb. They looked innocuous, almost like medical supplies. But next to them she found a small technical diagram and a translated label. Detonator. Type, German Army issue, timed electrical. Her blood ran cold. These were not just drawings or code, these were the actual instruments of destruction. And there, tucked beneath the detonators, was a small, rolled-up nautical chart. It was a chart of New York Harbor, and a specific point near the piers where the Liberty was docked was circled in red with a small X marked beside it. And next to the X, a tiny handwritten note, Est, charge position, 2200 HRS, 14th. The 14th, tomorrow night. Millie meticulously photographed everything, the detonators, the diagram, the chart with the marked coordinates, the chilling note. Her hands were steady, fueled by a grim purpose. This was it. This was the irrefutable proof Donovan had demanded. This was what would save the Liberty. She knew she couldn't go back to Donovan directly, not with the limited time she had. She had to use his designated contact, Special Agent Thomas Miller. Finding him, however, proved to be another labyrinthine challenge. Donovan had given her only a name and a vague office address in downtown Manhattan, warning her that Miller was a man who operated outside the usual channels. Millie spent the rest of the day in a frantic, desperate search. She couldn't call his office. It might be monitored. She couldn't just walk in and ask for a special agent without raising suspicion. She used her network of contacts, calling upon old favors, feigning urgency about a business matter for her father. She eventually tracked him down to a nondescript federal building, but his office was heavily guarded, requiring appointments that would take days to secure. Time was a luxury she didn't have. In a stroke of desperate genius, Millie remembered a journalist she knew, a persistent, slightly disreputable but incredibly well-connected reporter from a major New York newspaper named Frank Harding. He often covered police beats and had a reputation for getting scoops no one else could. She called him, setting up an urgent, discreet meeting at a secluded cafe, playing on his ambition for an exclusive story. "Frank," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I have something that will blow this city wide open, something that involves national security, but I need your help finding someone who can act before it's too late." Harding, sensing the gravity in her voice and the lure of a monumental story, agreed. He had his own network, his own ways of circumventing official channels. Within hours, using his connections within the city's police and federal building staff, he got her an unofficial, off-the-books meeting with Agent Miller. The meeting was arranged for late that night in a safe house, a nondescript apartment in Greenwich Village. Millie arrived, her nerves frayed, the evidence clutched tightly in her purse. Agent Miller was exactly as Donovan had described, quiet, intense, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was younger than Donovan but possessed a similar gravitas. He listened to her story without interruption, examining the photographs of the detonators, the chart, the handwritten note. The grim set of his jaw tightened as he studied the evidence. The casual nonchalance he usually maintained for such claims vanished. "Miss Albright," he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion, "this is precisely what we needed. These aren't just suspicions. These are instruments of war. And that chart, the target, is undeniable. He looked at her, a flicker of something akin to awe in his eyes. You have put yourself in extraordinary danger. You understand that? Millie nodded, her throat tight. I understand, Agent Miller, but the Liberty sails tomorrow. The dawn of the 14th of September broke over New York with a chilling clarity. The air crackled with a nervous energy, though most of the city remained blissfully unaware of the silent war being waged in its underbelly. For Millicent Albright, every ticking second was a hammer blow to her soul. Agent Miller had promised action, but the wheels of justice, even in an emergency, turned slowly. What if they were too late? What if Eric, sensing an approaching net, moved his timeline forward? She couldn't leave it to chance. She had to ensure his capture to guarantee the Liberty's safety, even if it meant one final, terrifying confrontation. Her plan, born of desperation and an intimate knowledge of Eric's ego, was audacious in its simplicity. She would use the facade of their engagement, the very thing he had exploited against him. She would bait him, draw him out, and force his hand. She would stage a discovery. Millie called Eric that morning, her voice carefully modulated to convey a mixture of excitement and mild agitation. Darling, she chirped, I've just been reviewing some of our wedding plans, and I realized we simply must finalize the guest list for the European contingent before the invitations go out. I happened to be in your study this morning, looking for some papers I left, and I thought I might just take a quick peek at that address book you keep hidden in your desk, the one with all your family contacts. She held her breath. Eric's response was immediate, sharp, a flicker of controlled panic in his usually smooth demeanor. Millie, my dearest, please don't touch anything in my study. Those are private business papers, highly sensitive. I'll be home shortly and we can go over the list together then. His tone was too insistent, too quick. Her bait had landed. He was coming home. He would be checking his hidden compartment. He would realize his detonators and the chart were gone. Millie knew this was her window. She immediately called Agent Miller. He's coming home, she whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline. He knows I was in his study. He'll check the compartment. This is your chance, Agent. Miller's response was brief, precise. Understood, Miss Albright. We'll be there. Stay safe, and try to keep him occupied. The next few hours were a living nightmare. Millie paced her apartment, each shadow seeming to hold a lurking danger. She tried to appear calm, even cheerful when Eric arrived, a forced smile on her lips, a knot of terror in her stomach. He was impeccably dressed, as always, but his eyes were colder, harder than she had ever seen them. The charm was gone, replaced by a predatory edge. Millie, he said, his voice deceptively calm, but she heard the steel beneath it. You said you were in my study. Yes, darling, she replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Just a moment. I was looking for the caterer's number, and I thought, since your address book has so many international contacts, it might be in there. She gestured vaguely towards his study. Eric walked directly to his study, his footsteps deliberate. Millie followed, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. She watched from the doorway as he went straight to his desk. He opened the drawer, his movements swift and practiced. He found the hidden latch, opened the deeper compartment. His hand reached in, then froze. His head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers. The charming fiancée was gone. In his place was a furious, dangerous predator. Where are they, Millicent? He hissed, his accent suddenly much more pronounced, rougher. The components, the chart, where are they? Millie took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling hands. What are you talking about, Eric? I don't know what you mean. She knew this was it, the confrontation, the moment she had played for. He stepped towards her, his face contorted with rage, his veneer of sophistication completely stripped away. Don't play coy with me, Liebchen. I know you were snooping. I felt it. Where is the evidence? Did you take it to your father, to the police? Evidence of what, Eric? She tried, but her voice cracked. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. The detonators, you stupid woman, the charts, the plans for the Liberty, you knew, didn't you? You've been playing me for a fool. His eyes were wild, dangerous. He was no longer trying to hide. I know everything, Eric, Millie said, her voice finding an unexpected strength, fueled by anger and pure adrenaline. I know you're a Nazi spy. I know you were going to blow up the Liberty. I know you were going to murder innocent people. And I know you used me, my family, our country, for your monstrous plans. Her words were a torrent, a release of weeks of pent-up fear and betrayal. Eric raised his hand, a chilling glint in his eyes as if to strike her. But before his hand could connect, the front door of the apartment burst open. FBI. Don't move, Count von Brandt. Special Agent Miller stood in the doorway, flanked by two other agents, their weapons drawn, pointed directly at Eric. Eric spun around, his eyes darting from the agents to the now visible tactical units swarming the hallway. He realized he was trapped. The facade of his perfect life, his elaborate deception, had crumbled around him. For a moment, he considered resistance. His hand twitched towards an unseen weapon, but the cold, professional glint in Miller's eyes, the sheer number of agents, told him it was futile. His shoulders sagged. The charming Count, the sophisticated spy, was reduced to a cornered animal. Millicent, Miller said, his voice calm and reassuring, are you harmed? Millie shook her head, tears finally stinging her eyes, a mixture of terror and immense relief. No, Agent, I'm all right. Eric was handcuffed, his face a mask of bitter defeat. As he was led away, his eyes met Millie's one last time. There was no charm, no love, just a raw, chilling hatred. You have no idea what you've done, Millicent, he spat, his voice low and venomous. You have betrayed your own kind. The Reich will remember this. Millie watched him go. The image of his hateful gaze burned into her memory. The man she had loved, the man she had almost married, was a monster unmasked. The danger was over, but the cost was immense. Her heart was broken, her innocence shattered, and her life irrevocably changed. Later that evening, after giving her statement to Agent Miller and his team, Millie sat alone in her Washington hotel room. The news came through. The SS Liberty had been thoroughly inspected, its cargo hold cleared of any explosive devices, its departure delayed but ultimately safe. Count Erich von Brandt, along with several of his co-conspirators, had been arrested. The network, meticulously built and ruthlessly operated, had been dismantled, thanks to the courage of one New York socialite. The story was quickly hushed up, classified top secret to avoid alarming the American public and provoking an international incident. Millie Albright, the heroine who saved a ship and exposed a spy, would receive no medals, no public accolades. Her reward was the quiet knowledge that she had done her duty, that she had protected her country, and that countless lives had been saved because of her impossible gamble. Her name would remain largely unknown to history, a secret hero of a secret war. But she knew, and General Donovan and Agent Miller, they knew. The glamour of her socialite life felt hollow now, trivial. She had stared into the abyss of war and survived. Her world had changed forever. The crisp autumn air of Washington, D.C. felt different to Millicent Albright. It no longer carried the scent of possibility, but the lingering odor of fear and a grim determination. Erich von Brandt was behind bars, his network dismantled, the Liberty safe. But the victory felt hollow, tinged with a profound sadness that burrowed deep into her soul. Her personal war might have been won, but the global conflict, as Eric's chilling words had foreshadowed, was only just beginning. Back in New York, life resumed its familiar rhythm, yet for Millie, nothing was the same. The glittering soirees, the charity balls, the endless rounds of social calls, they all felt like a charade. How could she discuss the latest fashion trends or the upcoming horse race when she knew, with terrifying certainty, that war was inevitable, that innocent lives were being lost, and that the man she had loved was a dedicated enemy of everything she held dear? The secret she carried was a heavy cloak, insulating her from the superficiality of her former life, but also isolating her. Her parents, though relieved that the engagement was broken off, Eric's vague, sudden recall to Germany was the official story spread by her family to avoid scandal, sensed a change in their daughter. The sparkling wit was still there, but it was sharper, edged with a cynicism she'd never possessed before. Her eyes held a depth of experience that belied her years, a silent knowledge that couldn't be explained. She often found herself staring blankly during conversations, her mind replaying snippets of Eric's cold voice, the precise schematics, the grim purpose behind the detonators. She slept little, haunted by dreams of exploding ships and burning cities. Agent Miller, her silent confidant, maintained sporadic contact. His visits were brief, always discreet, often disguised as official business with her father. He would offer terse updates. Eric and his associates were being held indefinitely, their intelligence proving invaluable. The network was larger than anyone had initially suspected. America was gearing up for war, slowly but surely. Each update was a grim validation of her actions, a reminder of the proximity of danger, and a stark confirmation that her ordeal was not an isolated incident, but a prelude to a global cataclysm. Millie often visited the docks, watching the massive freighters being loaded with supplies bound for Britain. Each ship that sailed safely out of the harbor was a small, personal triumph, a testament to her courage. But she also saw the increasing naval presence, the soldiers in uniform, the heightened security. The illusion of America's neutrality was steadily eroding. The whispers of war that had once seemed distant now thundered on the horizon. Then came December 7, 1941. The news of Pearl Harbor ripped through the nation like a jagged blade. America was officially at war. The collective shock, grief, and fury that engulfed the country were palpable. For Millie, it was a moment of profound, painful confirmation. Her quiet warnings, her desperate efforts had been swallowed by the relentless march of history. The war was here, on their shores, in their hearts. In the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, New York City transformed. Blackout drills became commonplace. Air raid wardens patrolled the streets. Patriotic fervor swept through the nation. Every aspect of life became geared towards the war effort. Society events, once the bedrock of Millie's existence, took on a new, urgent purpose. War bonds rallies, blood drives, knitting circles for soldiers. Millie found herself drawn to these efforts, but with a different kind of motivation than her peers. While others were spurred by patriotism and a desire to contribute, Millie was driven by a deep-seated understanding of the enemy, a visceral knowledge of the darkness she had personally confronted. She spoke fluent German, a skill she had once used to flirt with Eric, now a tool with frightening new implications. She possessed an intimate, first-hand knowledge of how sophisticated espionage networks operated, how charm could mask menace, how seemingly innocuous details could be critical intelligence. Her experience had given her a unique lens through which to view the unfolding conflict. She saw the subtle propaganda, the nascent counterintelligence efforts, the desperate need for every citizen to contribute. She saw beyond the headlines, understanding the intricate layers of deception and strategy. Her past, once a source of deep personal pain, was slowly transforming into an unexpected asset. The private battle she had fought against Eric had unknowingly prepared her for the public war that now consumed the world. She was no longer just a socialite. She was a woman forged in fire with an unspoken mission. With America now fully engaged in World War II, the nation mobilized with unprecedented speed. Every citizen was called upon to contribute, and Millicent Albright, despite her past, was no exception. Yet her contribution would be different, far removed from the public eye. General Donovan, now heading the newly formed Office of Strategic Services, OSS, America's first centralized intelligence agency, hadn't forgotten Millie. Agent Miller, now a trusted aide within the OSS, became her conduit. Miller contacted Millie discreetly, arranging a meeting not in his official capacity, but as a family friend checking in. He found her still withdrawn, but her determination burned brighter than ever. She expressed her frustration, her deep-seated need to do more than simply knit socks or sell war bonds. She spoke of her specific knowledge of German espionage tactics, her ability to recognize a lie behind a charming smile, her understanding of the subtle ways agents moved through society. Donovan, always a man ahead of his time, understood the immense value of unconventional assets. He saw in Millie not a fragile socialite, but a proven operative with an unparalleled, first-hand understanding of the enemy's methods. He recognized that her unique social position, her language skills, and her honed observational abilities could be a potent weapon on the home front, particularly in the realm of counterintelligence and propaganda analysis. Millie was offered a position, a covert role so secret it didn't even have a formal title. She would work for the OSS, not in a field capacity but as an analyst, a special consultant tasked with sifting through intelligence, analyzing German propaganda, and identifying potential enemy agents operating within high society. Her office wasn't in a federal building, but a secluded, unassuming brownstone in Georgetown, where she operated under a false identity, known only by a handful of trusted colleagues. Her days became a stark contrast to her previous life. Instead of choosing gowns, she pored over intercepted German radio transmissions, listening to the guttural language she once associated with Eric's seductive whispers, now recognizing the cold, calculated messages of war. She analyzed coded communications, sometimes recognizing patterns that mirrored Eric's own methods. She studied photographs of German agents, looking for the telltale signs she had learned to identify in Eric: the subtle arrogance, the perfectly tailored clothes that still seemed to hide something, the eyes that betrayed too much or too little. Her experience with Eric had given her an invaluable, almost intuitive insight into the enemy's mindset. She understood their meticulous planning, their calculated risks, their ability to charm and deceive. She could often predict their next moves by putting herself in their shoes, imagining how Eric would have approached a similar situation. She became exceptionally good at identifying inconsistencies in defector stories, at recognizing subtle nuances in propaganda that revealed deeper strategic intentions. Her sharp wit, once used for social banter, was now employed to dissect enemy rhetoric, exposing its flaws and dangers. One of her most crucial contributions came during a period of heightened U-boat activity off the American coast. German intelligence was known to use maritime signals and coded messages to coordinate with their submarines. Millie, with her knowledge of Eric's methods and his interest in shipping routes, began to notice a peculiar pattern in seemingly random newspaper advertisements placed in small coastal towns. They looked like innocuous personal ads: lost dog answers to Rex, for sale used fishing boat. But Millie's gut, honed by suspicion, screamed otherwise. She cross-referenced these ads with known U-boat sightings and intercepted German communications. She noticed certain phrases, certain names, that had appeared in Eric's old notebooks. She realized these were dead drops, coded messages embedded in plain sight, intended for German agents on shore who would then relay critical information to U-boats. She developed a complex system of analysis, deciphering these seemingly harmless messages, providing the Navy with crucial intelligence about enemy positions and supply lines. Her work led to the sinking of several U-boats and the apprehension of numerous shore-based agents, significantly bolstering the American war effort in the Atlantic. Her identity, however, remained a closely guarded secret. To her family and friends, she was working in government administration in Washington, a vague but respectable cover. She attended official functions, playing the role of the elegant socialite, but her mind was always alert, her eyes constantly scanning for the anomalies, the discrepancies that only her unique past could make visible. She became a master of living a double life, the beautiful, charming Millie Albright on the surface, the sharp, analytical intelligence officer underneath. The psychological toll was immense. She lived in constant fear of discovery, not just by the enemy but by her own circle. The memory of Eric, though now distant, remained a spectral presence, a constant reminder of the danger lurking beneath the surface of normalcy. She found solace only in the quiet satisfaction of her work, in the knowledge that she was actively fighting the war, protecting the very nation that had once dismissed her warnings. The war finally ended in 1945, not with a whimper, but with the explosive force of atomic bombs. The celebrations that swept across America were euphoric, a collective sigh of relief after years of sacrifice and dread. For Millie, the end of the war brought a complex mix of emotions. Joy certainly that the fighting was over, that the threat Eric represented had been decisively crushed, but also a profound weariness and a sense of anticlimax. Her work, her secret war, was over. Her purpose, for so long a burning fire within her, now seemed to flicker. Her covert role at the OSS came to an end. With the war concluding, the OSS itself was disbanded, its functions later evolving into what would become the CIA. Millie's contributions, still highly classified, remained buried in dusty government archives. She returned to New York, to her family, to the life she had once known. But she was not the same Millie Albright who had left. The golden cage now felt truly empty. The socialites gossiping about peacetime fashions, the men talking about post-war investments, it all seemed so trivial, so far removed from the life-or-death struggles she had known. The personal scars remained. The memory of Eric, of his charm and his monstrous betrayal, never fully faded. It was a constant reminder of the darkness that could hide beneath the most polished veneer. She learned to live with it, to integrate it into the fabric of who she had become. She never married, never again allowed herself to be so completely vulnerable. Her trust, once so easily given, was now a precious commodity, hard-won and carefully guarded. But the war had also instilled in her a profound sense of purpose, a deep appreciation for freedom and the sacrifices made to protect it. She didn't seek public accolades, didn't write memoirs. That wasn't her way. Instead, Millie found new avenues to channel her quiet strength and her honed intellect. She became a staunch advocate for education, particularly in international affairs, believing that understanding other cultures was the best defense against future conflicts. She channeled her family's considerable wealth into philanthropic endeavors, subtly supporting initiatives that promoted international cooperation and peace. She became a formidable presence in the background, a quiet force for good. She chaired boards, advised foundations, and mentored young women, always emphasizing the importance of independent thought, critical analysis, and unwavering courage. She spoke of the importance of recognizing the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, of standing up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. She never explicitly revealed her past, but her words carried the weight of experience, the gravitas of someone who had faced the abyss and returned. As for Eric von Brandt, his fate remained sealed within classified documents. Rumors circulated, of course, as they always do. Some said he was executed, others that he spent the war in a high-security prison, his intelligence extracted and exploited. Still others whispered that he somehow escaped, a shadow returning to the shadows. Millie never sought to know. His presence in her life had served its purpose. He had been the catalyst that transformed her, the crucible in which her character was forged. Millie Albright lived a long, impactful life, though her true heroism remained largely unsung. She became a respected, if somewhat enigmatic, figure in New York society. She continued to possess a keen, observant eye, a quiet wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to the values she had risked everything to protect. She was a testament to the idea that heroes often wear no capes, receive no medals, and fight their most crucial battles in the quiet corners of their lives. Her story is a powerful reminder that history is not just made by generals and politicians, but by ordinary people forced into extraordinary circumstances. It's about the countless individuals who, when confronted with impossible choices, choose courage over comfort, truth over deception, and duty over personal safety. It's a reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, but so too can the most profound strength. Millie Albright, the socialite who caught a Nazi spy, became a silent guardian of the home front, proving that the most impactful battles are often fought in the shadows, by those whose names history might forget, but whose actions shape the world. And her story, while concluding here, echoes with an unsettling truth. The battle against deception and those who would undermine our values never truly ends. It merely changes form. Millie's story, a stark reminder of the hidden dangers during World War II, makes you wonder about the other extraordinary individuals who fought secret wars on the home front. If you found yourself captivated by the intricate web of espionage and the quiet bravery of an unexpected hero, then you absolutely must check out our next video. Click the link on your screen now to uncover another incredible tale of courage and cunning from the greatest generation.